Welcome back, everybody, from that very short break. I'm back, Maeve O'Rourke, for the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, sponsored by Elgato, but I get to be here with one of my good friends and a caster I'm very excited to have today, Jake Muller. Jake, what did you think of the very first match that you saw today?
Oh, it was really fun. It came down to the wire at the end there. That play rough miss was super unfortunate, but I think both players did a really good job at the end of that game. Just trying to, get themselves in the best position possible to try and win that first match. Yeah, the first match in any team tournament like this is so important because you get that momentum for your team. Now Italy is up 1-0, so if they, win the second match, they'll have a pretty sizable lead. You only need 4 matches to win in this seven player team tournament style. So pretty big start for Italy there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we had 2 pretty nice offensive teams. And looking at our next teams too, which I'm sure everybody got a little bit of a sneak preview of, going to be a really interesting piece here as well. A lot of sun going on with no rain here. So for both of these players, which is going to be really interesting to see how they move around and how they take care of their speed with the sun, especially. So, now that we've been able to see at least one player, one set of matches from the South Korean and Italian side, we'll be able to move on to the second one with both of these players. So if we can take a jump and see, because we'll be showing Flavio first as for our very first player from the Italian side. So if we can take a jump over, and we'll be able to see Flavio del Pidio versus Sanghyeon Na. And so a really interesting matchup here. Flavio is a player that a lot of the time, anytime I'm watching and spectating this stream and I see that he's a match that is being featured, I'll look at the Victory Road chat and it goes absolutely wild. So a bit of a fan favorite here, I think, for the Italian players, and he's going to be starting with the Xerneas.
Yeah, I mean, Flavio, he's been around for a long time now, but 2018 is kind of when he broke out. Like you can see there, he won the Leipzig Regional that year, I believe, at DreamHack. And then the next year, he won the European International Championships with the Xerneas. That was his kind of famous Xerneas Rayquaza team that picked up a lot of steam right after that tournament. So kind of cool to see him going back to that Xerneas. Clearly has a lot of experience with it. But like you said, Maeve, we do have Sun. We have the Venusaur and the Torkoal, both of which have been kind of staples throughout this entire 2020-2021 season. In pretty much every format that they're legal in, every series, we see them stick around. So I think it'll be cool. The 2 fire types in addition to Torkoal is pretty interesting, because then now you have essentially 3 Pokemon that can make really good use of that sun.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 Pokemon that can make really good use of that sun on this side, but then also you're not going to have to worry about dealing with sun or rain on the other side, because if we go over to Flavio's opponent here, he's also running Sun, but he is running the Cherrim Groudon team with that Incineroar, the Entei, the Dragapult, and the Porygon 2. And we've seen this team a couple of times before on stream with that Trick Room Porygon 2, the very strong, physically attacking, typically Choice Band almost for that Dragapult. Sometimes we've seen the Choice Band on the Groudon as well, but 2 teams that are going to almost not want to put up the sun against each other, knowing how they can use it.
Teams make use of the sun so well that it might be a game of chicken here. Like whichever player puts up the sun first, you have to make sure you're doing it at a time where you know you can make really good use of it right away. Because if you give the other player an inch here, they're probably just going to take a mile. Like this Cherrim with Flower Gift is going to be really cool for Sanghyeon's team, because other than the Porygon 2, every other Pokemon on his team is going to be a physical attacker. Like you said, that Dragapult usually running a physical set on this team, and then Groudon, Entei, and Incineroar. Again, 3 Pokemon that, one sets the sun, 2 of them are fire types, they're going to throw off really strong fire type attacks. And with that Flower Gift next to it, it's going to be really scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sanghyeon, he's only his only accolade that he's mentioned here is the top 4 Pokemon Trainers Cup in 2021. However, still very talented player. We've been able to see some of that stuff on stream, and like I said earlier, we've seen this Groudon Cherrim team a bunch, but only in the past, I think, 2 to 3 weeks has the Groudon Cherrim with Porygon really shown up here. And the only main first time I can remember harkening back to it was I was able to cast one of Jamie Boyd's matches where he brought in Appleton versus a Groudon Cherrim team, and he was so certain he would be able to win as long as he was able to take out that Dragapult, because he thought the Dragapult was physical and it was a body press iron defense set. However, it was still carrying a Draco Meteor just in case. So just a nice callback to some of the really interesting teams we've seen in this World Cup so far.
Even calling back to older formats, I think, Trick Room Groudon is something that we've seen in pretty much any format where we've had those big restricted legendary Pokemon be legal. Back to 2016, there was the Primals teams with something like Groudon or Cresselia with Trick Room. In 2019, there was that super popular Groudon Lunala team running around, and both made use of that Trick Room really well. So especially given kind of the fast nature of Flavio's team, other than that Torkoal, of course, I wouldn't be super surprised to see Trick Room go up. But again, if you do put Trick Room up, Torkoal's going to be attacking first pretty much 100% of the time, unless there's a Rogue Iron Ball somewhere.
Rogue Iron Ball or Rogue Rune Service, either one. I feel like I've seen Rune Service a couple of times, only on Jamie Boyd teams. Again, I keep bringing back Jamie Boyd teams, but
he's got the text.
They're very memorable for a good reason. Going into game one here, though, for Flavio and for Sanghyeon's teams, both of their leads, like you said, maybe a game of chicken, but not so fast, because Entei and Groudon will be setting the sun right off the bat here, and then we'll be seeing the Incineroar and the Xerneas. So Incineroar, Xerneas, we've seen that a million times as a lead before.
Yeah, this is not a exactly new lead, but it's so popular because it's so effective. Incineroar with that Intimidate, and the Fake Out is just really good at setting up these Xerneas. A new interesting part of Generation 8 in these Sword and Shield games is that Entei does not get affected by Intimidate, which is actually really big here. The sun immediately went up. It's going to be threatening something like a Sacred Fire immediately into this Xerneas, and given that you can't even fake it out because inner focus is what's preventing the Intimidate, there's not really a way that Flavio has to block the Sacred Fire. And you saw even he has the Rillaboom and the Venusaur in the back. A Sacred Fire into that Xerneas slot is going to be immediately very, very threatening for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe there's a fear too of a roar. Not always the most common move to see on something like a Entei as well. But if you can only fake out the Groudon here, then you really only have to worry about maybe taking a Sacred Fire. But a Protect instead from this Xerneas means that this Xerneas is not going to be taking anything like a Choice Scarf move from this Entei or a Precipice Blades from this Groudon here. So Groudon's Precipice Blades will go into that Incineroar, will do over 50% of the damage, but most importantly, that means that there is not going to be any Sacred Fires or any Precipice Blades damage onto the Xerneas, while a Parting Shot goes into this Entei and will allow this Incineroar to switch back out, maybe send in something like that as like the Venusaur here to maybe go for something like some Spores, or maybe even the Rillaboom to go maybe for something like a very powerful Grassy Glide.
Just a smart turn from Flavio. You know that your Incineroar can probably survive a Precipice Blades, and the Entei probably doesn't have anything that can immediately knock out the Incineroar in combination with the Blades. So you get that Parting Shot off. That is basically the only way you have to decrease that Entei's attack, because again, Intimidate doesn't work. And now Flavio gets a switch into either this Rillaboom or Venusaur. I would maybe expect the Venusaur, just because something like a Sleep Powder, like you said, is really the only way that Flavio has to prevent this Entei from attacking. But obviously, these Grass-type Pokemon are going to threaten the Groudon too, so kind of an interesting choice here, but just because there's a bit of a tough spot here for Flavio.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't always want to send out a Venusaur in front of a very strong fire-type attack. Right. And you have two here from this Groudon with the Heat Crash and from an Entei Sacred Fire especially. So Venusaur, especially if it's carrying something like a Focus Sash, which it definitely could be. We've seen it before. It can also run a couple of different items as well. So, Venusaur is one of those Pokemon that it's got a couple of different things that it's supposed to do very, very well, but it doesn't love to take damage in response, right? Like, it can set up something like a Spore and it can be able to kind of stop whatever it is that Sanghyeon's trying to do here. But if it does take some pretty strong damage right out of the gate with something even like another Precipice Blades or a Sacred Fire, because this Xerneas is already protected, you're going to actually see here an Earth Power really interestingly into the Entei. It is not enough to knock it out though. Shows that Life Orb on this Venusaur, and then we're going to see that Flare Blitz, interestingly enough, from the Entei into the Venusaur. This will knock the Venusaur out, but most importantly, it'll knock out the Entei in return due to that recoil. So now Entei is off the field. You can send in a Pokemon to fake out this Groudon maybe and go for something like a Geomancy now, possibly, or you could even go for a Geomancy right now in the face of this Groudon, especially maybe dealing with something like a Precipice Blades, just to take some damage out. But you will be at a nicer tier of speed. You will only be getting a special defense boost, which won't be helping with these physical attacks from this Groudon especially. But most importantly, if you're able to survive this attack, you can get into a really nice place here. You will be taking this Precipice Blade damage, and it doesn't even get it down to half HP.
Really, really good turn for Flavio. The Entei is actually the only fairy resist on Sanghyeon's side, and so now that the Entei is gone, this Xerneas is now boosted, and there's not really a whole lot that can be stomaching these something like a really strong Moonblast from the Xerneas. You do have the Porygon 2, which is known to be a very bulky Pokemon. Will definitely be able to survive a Moonblast, but can't really do much in return other than set up a possible Trick Room. We do see the Incineroars mirror each other. Based on how these Intimidates go, it might tell us something about this speed. We see Flavio's Intimidate go first, which is pretty useful information because that means that at worst you have a speed tide to fake out first, and at best your Incineroar is just trained to be faster. So that's really nice info for Flavio to have there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also assume if it is a Trick Room team that Incineroar may want to go slower anyway to be faster in that Trick Room. So nice thing here is you can get a fake out off. You can stop something like another fake out or even a parting shot here to lower the special attack of that Xerneas who just boosted with that Geomancy, and maybe allow for something like a really strong Dazzling Gleam if it is carrying it, something like a Moonblast as well. Groudon though, not going to take either of these attacks. Will send in Cherrim. Cherrim will boost the special defense here of its partner Pokemon Incineroar. Most importantly, it will also boost the attack, but it may not be able to go for an attack as it's taking a fake out from Flavio's Incineroar as well. There is going to be actually a Dazzling Gleam here though. Targeting both of these Pokemon isn't enough to knock either of them out. Brings down the Cherrim down to 50% of its HP, but it will be gaining some leftovers here for some HP recovery.
Flavio apparently noticing that Intimidate interaction too, because that's such a smart play. You fake out the opposing Incineroar, make sure it can't fake you out. We did see it did try to go for fake out. It flinched before the Xerneas was able to Dazzling Gleam. And you get a really good bunch of damage off into the Xerneas and the Incineroar. It is a very smart Cherrim switch. The Flower Gift boosting special defense comes in very handy here. And based on the damage from that Dazzling Gleam, I'm not even sure a Moonblast could knock out the Incineroar from here, but opting just to play it safe here.
Yeah, absolutely. Protect from the Xerneas and protect from the Cherrim here. Cherrim's not going to want to take something like a Flare Blitz possibly, but instead it'll be a parting shot from one Incineroar on Flavio's side onto the Incineroar on Sanghyeon's side. So now we'll send the Incineroar back to Flavio. Flavio will have the chance to send out his Rillaboom as his Venusaur has been knocked out, and we'll reveal that last Pokemon on the team here. Get more fake out pressure onto the field with this Rillaboom. Possibly some knockoff pressure as well if you're really worried about it. But neither of these Pokemon are going to be too worried about taking something like a Grassy Glide or a Wood Hammer here instead. But you'll see actually a U-turn from one Incineroar onto, I was going to say almost the other because I'm so used to it, but the Rillaboom here. So Incineroar switching out for Sanghyeon could bring in something powerful here, like that Groudon like we've seen, or could reveal that fourth Pokemon, which, as hopefully for Sanghyeon, it's not something like that Dragapult, which wouldn't love to deal with it. We'll instead bring the Groudon back out onto the field, though.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of a neutral turn there. Both of the big threat Xerneas protected, the Cherrim protected itself just to maintain that Flower Gift. If you're Flavio, you don't really mind a Rillaboom staring down a Groudon just because you do have that option for something like a powerful grass type attack, a Grassy Glide or a Wood Hammer. And in combination with a Fairy attack from the Xerneas, I imagine that could knock out the Groudon. The question here though is whether you kind of bank on Sanghyeon allowing you to, and whether this Groudon possibly has Protect. We don't know the item, could be Choice Band. But the fake out here is a pretty safe play because even if, for example, you fake out the Groudon, Cherrim not exactly known for being a strong damage dealing Pokemon, so probably a pretty safe play.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that we've seen that Groudon is the only Pokemon here setting the sun, right? So Torkoal stayed in the back. There is no Trick Room setup for Sanghyeon either. So now you can at least know that you're not going to have to worry about maybe having the speed swapped here by a Trick Room setter or anything here. And you can just make sure that if you can get rid of this Groudon before it can switch out and switch back in and reset the sun, then you won't have to worry about that Flower Gift either. Incineroar, though, will switch in for the Cherrim, who has switched out, getting more fake out pressure, but getting an Intimidate off onto this Rillaboom, who could go for something like a Grassy Glide into the Groudon here. It will instead go for a fake out into the Groudon, most importantly, making sure that there isn't going to be any powerful damage from a Precipice Blades. While this Incineroar takes a Moonblast, is not enough to knock it out here, though. So that is going to mean that the sun is now off of the field, and now if this Cherrim switches back in, it's going to have to help its partner Pokemon here reset the sun.
Just nailing these fake outs. He's gotten these fake outs correct pretty much every time he's tried to use it. That's a really nice turn because now the Incineroar is in range for any attack from the Xerneas, whether Flower Gift is up or not. But the Sun going down actually means that Flower Gift will not be active unless Sanghyeon switches out the Groudon and brings it back in. And if he wants to do that, he's got to bring the Cherrim in, possibly to take an attack from the Xerneas at the same time. So there's a pretty good chance Flower Gift is no longer a factor in the rest of this game, which could mean that the Xerneas is in prime position to end it.
Yeah, absolutely. Incineroar, though, switches in, most importantly, getting an Intimidate onto that onto that physical Groudon, who's going to especially not like taking it, and will allow for some more fake out pressure, which will allow this Xerneas going for a Protect this turn to have a nice open turn next turn to go for something like another Moonblast or a Dazzling Gleam. Takes a fake out, but through that Protect won't do too much, while a Heat Crash into this Incineroar is a great switch because it is not taking a whole lot of damage from this Groudon, and if this Groudon is choice locked now into Heat Crash, that means it's not locked into Precipice Blades.
Yeah, it's not locked into Precipice Blades. It's locked into Heat Crash without the Sun at -1, so it's not going to be doing too much damage for the rest of this game. And again, if you're Flavio, that's a really smart switch. You get the Intimidate onto 2 physical attackers. You protect your Xerneas just to make sure that it doesn't take any damage. If Incineroar somehow gets knocked out, this turn it switches in. You just bring the Rillaboom back in. You have Fake Out active once again. So Flavio just really positioning this Xerneas very well to start firing off some really strong moves and taking some knockouts.
Yeah, Groudon, though, says, I'm all set without the Sun and without my at least bare neutral attack stat. I'll send in Cherrim. Cherrim will be taking this fake out for me. Cherrim not being able to show how cute it is, though, with that Sun. A Dazzling Gleam will be able to knock out both of these Pokemon here for Sanghyeon. So now at least Sanghyeon's going to be able to send in this Groudon with the Sun, but at what cost, right? You know you're going to be having to deal with something like this, Xerneas, and I think this is pretty much a very comfortable game here for Flavio, able to deal with a lot of pressure from Sanghyeon with incredible positioning.
Yeah, I don't even know if something like your critical hit Precipice Blades would even be able to knock out Xerneas here. Flavio just putting this Xerneas in such a strong position as soon as it hit the field. There was really never a time when it was very threatened, maybe staring down the Entei at the very beginning of the game, but that huge Earth Power from the Venusaur did a big chunk to the Entei and made it knock itself out with Flare Blitz. So from that point on, there was really nothing that could stomach these attacks on Xerneas.
Yeah, absolutely. And Entei really was the biggest threat here for Flavio, like you said. Only thing that resisted fairy type moves, only thing that could really deal with this Xerneas to get enough damage before it was able to get a Geomancy off. So being able to take care of it was a really nice move here instead, so that this Precipice Blades from this Groudon, we'll be able to go into this Rillaboom, not do a whole lot of damage though, and then Xerneas is able to once again protect. We'll be able to go for something like a Fake Out and then a Moonblast, or a Grassy Glide and then a Moonblast, or, really anything here to kind of just get enough damage to wrap up this game for Flavio. You just have to make sure that, as long as you're faster, as long as you're able to kind of deal with everything that's going on here with this Groudon, you'll be able to show a nice amount of damage. But most importantly now, Flavio's not going to see exactly how much a Geomancy does to that Groudon, which could have been some nice information to know. But most importantly, a nice forfeit to keep that information concealed for game 2.
Yeah, no, definitely a very smart forfeit from Sanghyeon there. Doesn't want to reveal, possibly if he has Protect, possibly if he is or is not choice banded, and more importantly, you don't get to see how much Moonblast does to Groudon, like you mentioned. So even though it came out of that game with a loss, Sanghyeon preserved information as much as he could, which is going to help him going into game 2 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most important thing for Sanghyeon to know is that he has to protect his Entei, right? Yeah. He has to bring something that is going to make sure that he can either redirect away from the Entei, or, he can deal with something like that Xerneas early. That's the thing with Xerneas too, is you have to deal with them early before they can really start steamrolling your entire team, where even if they're not getting that Geomancy, that Moonblast or Dazzling Gleam off every single turn, they're able to deal with you in a way that allows them to get big hits whenever they need to, whether that be with fake outs like we saw quite often from Flavio, who, like you said, every single fake out was perfect, right? And every single switch in was just absolutely very well executed. It felt like he had Sanghyeon's number that entire game.
You could tell that Padwas played a lot of Xerneas from that game. He did exactly what he needed to. He knew exactly what Pokemon needed to be on the field at what time, and that's just the mark of experience. Like we said, he's been using Xerneas for at least a couple years now and won an international championship with it. So clearly no stranger to the Geomancy deer.
Yeah, absolutely. But like you said, though, we're going to have to go into game 2 to make sure, see exactly what happens here with these leads. Instead, going to be Groudon Entei like we saw from that last game. But Venusaur comes out in the lead here with Rillaboom. So 2 grass types on the field now. No Xerneas in this lead, but maybe trying to make sure you deal with this Entei early and right off of the bat, even if you have to give up your fake out into that Groudon turn 1.
This is kind of a tricky spot, though, because Entei is facing down 2 grass types, which usually you would want to see. However, we've seen a Life Orb Earth Power come out for this Venusaur already, and Sanghyeon conveniently set up the Sun for that Venusaur, so Flavio kind of calling out the same lead again. You know, if you want to take a knockout with this Entei with a Flare Blitz, you are most likely going to lose it. And if you lose Entei early again, there's not going to be a whole lot stopping the Xerneas from coming in and geomancying and kind of just waiting for its time to end the game like last time. So if Sanghyeon, he decided to bring the same lead, that might indicate, maybe he has something else with Xerneas in the back. Possibly he did bring the Trick Room option with that Porygon. But we have to see what he does with this Entei here, which I think is going to be the really important piece on his team.
Yeah, absolutely. He could switch it out here possibly. Instead, we'll be switching out the Groudon first, and we'll send in that Cherrim to protect this Entei, which could be a really nice move with that Flower Gift. Will allow it, maybe, not entirely sure on my calcs here, would maybe allow it to survive with some recoil damage if it takes something like an Earth Power, but a Grassy Glide into that Entei will be helpful to get a nice amount of chip damage down. With an Earth Power here, not enough to take it out, actually showing exactly how important that Flower Gift is, and now this is going to allow for this Entei to go for a Sacred Fire, not take any recoil, and be enough to knock out this Venusaur. So a very smart turn 1 from Sanghyeon.
Absolutely, yeah. The Venusaur being knocked out is really big because it looked like Flavio's best way of handling the Entei last game. The Xerneas having only Fairy type attacks means it'll be resisted. Rillaboom and Incineroar, not particularly great into Entei, but I guess Incineroar kind of trades even with it. But the Sacred Fire means that it doesn't have to worry about the recoil. Sacred Fire in the Sun will easily be enough to knock out his Venusaur. So it's a very smart switch to the Cherrim there, knowing that the Earth Power and the Grassy Glide definitely would have knocked out the Entei before it could move. However, the Flower Gift protecting it to make sure that that Venusaur is eliminated.
Yeah, absolutely. A very smart play. That Flower Gift shows exactly how important it can be, especially to be able to help out your partners on this field. Xerneas will come in. It's not going to be super comfortable, like you said, if it does deal with something like a Sacred Fire from this Entei as well. We haven't fully confirmed where the Choice Band is, right? We can assume it's on the Groudon just by the moves that it's used so far, which means it may not be on this Entei, which could be something like maybe an Assault Vest variant, or even something like even a Choice Scarf, which we've seen before. Choice Scarf Entei being another really popular form of the Entei, to just allow it to go fast. And even if it is locked into this Sacred Fire, if it gets a burn off onto either of these 2 Pokemon, it's going to be pretty happy about it already, on top of that damage that it's going to get from the boost from the Flower Gift and from the Sun just being up in general. So this is the part of the game where Sanghyeon could really start to go and steamroll even with this Entei. While the Rillaboom's going to switch out here, we'll bring in the Incineroar for Flavio. So Flavio will at least be able to maybe deal with a Sacred Fire into the Incineroar a lot better than it would be if it was to that Entei. Won't be able to fake out that Entei or really get a nice Intimidate down on it due to Inner Focus, but it may be able to deal with that Cherrim next turn, except it's going to be taking a nice helping hand here for its partner, and instead, actually a really interesting miss here, instead from the Sacred Fire into that Xerneas. So Sacred Fire missing is absolutely huge, because now it means that the Xerneas can get this Geomancy up and can be faster. Oh my goodness.
That is tragic. That would have been such big damage onto Xerneas. I wouldn't have been surprised if it even knocked it out. Helping Hand, Flower Gift, boosted Sacred Fire in the Sun would have done so much to that Xerneas. I don't think it's all doom and gloom yet. Like we said, you cannot fake out Entei because of Inner Focus. If you want to fake out Cherrim, Helping Hand will still go before fake out. So there is the opportunity for another Helping Hand Sacred Fire into the Xerneas. With the Flower Gift boost and Entei's Fire typing, maybe it can survive a Moonblast from here, even from a boosted Xerneas. I wouldn't put that out of the question. And so if Entei is able to hang on and fire off another Helping Hand Sacred Fire, that's going to be Sanghyeon's way back into this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't even see it protect this turn either, I believe. Actually, sorry, again, Helping Hand is just such a high priority that it goes before the Protect does. So Protect here means that you're not going to be dealing with the Sacred Fire. You're going to be trying to time out the Sun, most importantly, and going for, interestingly enough, a Throat Chop into this Entei. So that is your damage dealing move into the Entei, is that Throat Chop. Not enough to knock it out either, but now you can't Protect on this next turn.
You can't protect, but Xerneas should be able to outspeed this Entei and knock it out from here. That's just a smart play from Flavio there, knowing that he needed a little bit more damage onto that Entei to be able to knock it out. And now even if the Cherrim goes for Helping Hand, it won't matter because Entei won't be able to fire off an attack. This Incineroar now in a really strong spot again. Something like a Flare Blitz in the Sun easily will clear out this Cherrim. So Cherrim on this turn doesn't really have a whole lot to do. Might be something that Sanghyeon wants to preserve for later on. But yeah, just going back to that Sacred Fire miss, Sanghyeon was about to be in such a strong spot, with that Xerneas probably off the field. Unfortunately, now won't be able to Sacred Fire once again because Xerneas likely able to knock out Entei here.
Yeah, and Xerneas going for a Moonblast instead of a Dazzling Gleam just to take care of this Entei because of that Cherrim protecting. So a nice move here, not even worrying about going for the Dazzling Gleam instead. But instead, this Flare Blitz from the Incineroar will not be able to do anything onto that Cherrim here, even though through that protects, which means at least this Cherrim will be able to help with this Groudon. But this Groudon is switching in really close to the end of the Sun turns, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this might be the last one, maybe one more after that.
I believe so.
Either way, I mean, the Groudon with that Flower Gift should definitely be able to get something like a Precipice Blades off, especially because the Incineroar is currently on the field and cannot intimidate it. However, one Precipice Blades we've seen won't be enough to knock out Xerneas. Something like a Flower Gift Helping Hand Blades, again, I think would probably not be able to knock it out in one hit, and I think Xerneas is probably able to knock out Groudon in two, so it's a tough spot for Sanghyeon here, especially because you have to worry about the Incineroar too. And I believe the Rillaboom's still in the back, which would eat up their Precipice Blades super well. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Rillaboom loves to take a Precipice Blades far more than this Incineroar does, showing as such by switching out and bringing this Rillaboom in on a hard switch, not even something like a parting shot. A Moonblast, though, goes into the Cherrim slot here, will be almost enough to knock it out. It is not enough, but a substitute from the Cherrim, there's not enough HP to make a substitute from that Cherrim, interestingly enough, while a Heat Crash into the Rillaboom is enough to knock out that Rillaboom in the Sun with the Flower Gift ability. So incredibly interesting as well for this. That does mean that the Sun is now gone, which means Cherrim's Flower Gift is now off of the field, but you still have some grassy terrain, which also might be ending, I believe, very soon as well.
Interesting turn there. I mean, a really good call out with the Heat Crash, knowing that the Rillaboom is probably coming in. And the Cherrim eating that Moonblast pretty well and getting some leftovers recovery there. The substitute is not something I expected out of Cherrim. Pretty cool tech from Sanghyeon's team there. Unfortunately, not able to use it this turn because of that big Moonblast damage. But now that the Sun is gone, like you said, we're in another position where the Groudon has to switch out and come back in order for Flower Gift to reactivate. And in doing so, there's not going to be much preventing the Xerneas from firing off a Moonblast or a couple Dazzling Gleams or anything like that. So kind of a tough spot for Sanghyeon here. Once again, his only Fairy Resist is no longer in play, and so this Xerneas is going to have pretty free reign here.
Yeah, absolutely. I am just a little bit more worried now too, because that Cherrim is such a big part of Sanghyeon's team, and having this Cherrim on the field means that he'll at least be able to deal with some of this really powerful damage. Groudon switches out here. Groudon knows that exact same thing that I just said. Says, I'm not going to want to be taking any of this damage. I can't get the Sun up. My partner Cherrim cannot help me. I'll send an Incineroar and get some fake out pressure on that next turn. Maybe at least I'll make sure that Xerneas has to protect possibly. Another Moonblast though into this Incineroar slot still does a pretty good chunk of damage, does about half of its HP. The Incineroar is at least able to take that a little bit better. Grass Knot is a move here on this Cherrim that is also hiding, so I haven't even seen that Solar Blade. Another Throat Chop, though, from the Incineroar onto the opposing Incineroar is a really nice piece of interesting info to know as well, that this Incineroar may be not able to deal as much damage as it might like to these Pokemon, and knowing that you may have a fire type and having that as your last Pokemon on the field, you're not able to go for something like a parting shot possibly.
I think the good news for Sanghyeon here is that Flavio is down to his last two Pokemon. An Incineroar being on the field means that it can no longer intimidate the Groudon, so whenever it comes back in, it will be at, I believe it's a full HP still, and it won't be at that -1 attack from Intimidate. And so if you get this Xerneas down to, I think that's what the Groudon was supposed to be, just trying to chip Xerneas down into range for something like a Precipice Blades. I think that is definitely Sanghyeon's win condition here, and protecting that Cherrim, very smart here.
Yeah, it's going to be taking a not enough to knock it out, this Incineroar with that Dazzling Gleam. Another Flare Blitz into the Cherrim won't be enough to knock that out either. U-turn from the Incineroar into the Incineroar on Flavio's side will allow for that Groudon to come back in onto the field, allow this Cherrim to get its Flower Gift up, allow possibly to help out this Groudon survive another Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast. But, you know, still interesting to see, you know, this Groudon's still at full HP, wouldn't be able to gain anything from a grassy terrain either. But if this Cherrim has Pollen Puff, you know, it could be really interesting to see. This Cherrim's moveset's a little bit different, right? We've seen Grass Knot, we've seen Helping Hand, and we've seen Grass Knot, Helping Hand, Protect, and Substitute. So I think that might be all 4 moves.
Right, but I think this is exactly what Sanghyeon needed to do. Like, you got the Groudon back on the field at full health, neutral attack with the Flower Gift, and so this is kind of the important turn here. If Sanghyeon's able to go for something like Helping Hand, Precipice Blades, certainly would knock out Incineroar, obviously weak to the ground type moves, would do a huge chunk to the Xerneas, and I don't know that Xerneas has the damage to knock out both the Groudon and the Cherrim at the same time, because I think something like a Grass Knot and a Precipice Blades would probably do the trick. We saw Grass Knot actually do kind of a decent chunk for Xerneas being at +2, so Sanghyeon doing a really good job here, putting himself back into this game after that Sacred Fire miss.
Yeah, absolutely. Sacred Fire miss seemed a lot more detrimental than it could be right now, especially because of the great positioning from this Groudon, who is now getting a boost from Helping Hand from Cherrim right off of the gate. The Moonblast, though, from this Xerneas will go into the Groudon very beginning here. Does over 50%, but it's not enough to knock it out. Precipice Blades connects with both of the Pokemon on Flavio's side, is enough for a knockout on both of these Pokemon.
Wow.
So absolutely huge damage. Definitely shows that that is a Choice Banded Groudon, right? You have to assume, even with that Helping Hand. So shows where that item is on this game. This is going to bring it to a game 3 for both of these players.
That was so expertly maneuvered by Sanghyeon there. I think after that Sacred Fire miss, I keep bringing it up, not to harp on it, but that was such a big turning point in that game. And I think it would be very easy for him to get a little bit, frustrated, dejected after that miss. But knowing exactly what he needed to do to make sure that Groudon was on the field next to the Cherrim and able to fire off a Precipice Blades. That was going to be the win condition as soon as that Sacred Fire miss happened. And so just very smart, eliminating that Rillaboom, which would have been able to stomach a Precipice Blades, getting Flavio down to just the Xerneas and the Incineroar, meant that Groudon just needed to hit Precipice Blades, which sometimes is not as simple as you might expect it to be. Luckily for Sanghyeon, it happened.
We've been having a lot of really critical misses, I think, Jake, so we can't really count out Precipice Blade's accuracy just yet, just based on this game, and then, that play rough miss in that first match as well. So something to pay attention to, I suppose, just moving forward. But like you said, in that last game, Entei is something that you have to take care of early, but now you have to pay attention to the Cherrim too, right? And of course the goal is to knock out all 4 Pokemon, but you have to prioritize to get your game state to be exactly where you want to be by that end of the game so you can win, right? And getting that Entei out early is very important because it allows you to set up your Geomancy, but then dealing with that Cherrim in the late game is what's really problematic.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how kind of the framing of the win condition for Sanghyeon has shifted here, because I think originally we were both thinking, the Entei is the only thing that resists Xerneas, so you have to use the Entei to beat Xerneas. But Entei is also kind of the only thing that is super great into either of the grass types. Obviously, you have Incineroar too, but using Entei to eliminate Venusaur, which is really good into both Cherrim and Groudon, kind of opens up the door for Groudon to be able to use to beat the Xerneas, if you're following me at all. But,
I definitely follow you, right? It was a tough first turn where there were a lot of different options in game 2, right? And I thought that there was a great option that he went for, but instead, there was a Sacred Fire instead of a Flare Blitz, and you weren't able to get the knockout because Cherrim switched in the sun, which could very well happen this turn again, and help with this Entei being able to survive maybe some sort of powerful attack. However, you can't really fake out that Entei. If you fake out a Groudon, it could just instead switch into a Cherrim like we saw in that last game. Instead, though, Xerneas and Incineroar is the lead here for Flavio, so he did not bring in the Rillaboom and the Venusaur like we saw in that last game. Instead, it's harking back to that game 1 lead.
Still a solid lead. It's very flexible. I don't think there's really a bad lead on Flavio's team here, especially with these 4 Pokemon he's been bringing. But I still like this Groudon Entei combo from Sanghyeon here, because it just puts out so much pressure right off the bat. You have to be worried about something like a Precipice Blades and a Flare Blitz or Sacred Fire. I don't know if Entei has Stomping Tantrum. I think that's something it can learn, but something like a Stomping Tantrum and a Precipice Blades would probably be enough to knock out Incineroar too. So it's a lot of variables here that you have to worry about if you're Flavio.
Yeah, absolutely. Xerneas as well, like we've seen in the past few games, it definitely has to play a lot more defensive on this first turn. If you fake out something like this, if you fake out the Groudon, then you can be in a nice spot. Instead, though, Eruption is the move of choice here from this Entei. So an interesting spread move from this Entei. Instead, we'll still allow for this Geomancy to get up on this turn. This chip damage could be really important, though, maybe if this Groudon went for something like a Heat Crash in the Sun, or went for something like a Precipice Blades to get all of the damage off that it possibly can. But because there was no fake out as well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, unless I really missed it, that means this Groudon will still be able to attack. Geomancy is great to get up on this turn one. I think a little bit riskier than you might assume. Precipice Blades from the Groudon into both of these Pokemon. Not enough to knock out either of them, actually, even with that Eruption damage. And this allows for a Flare Blitz into that Groudon slot, which does actually a really good chunk of damage in the Sun here and gets the burn on the Groudon. An absolutely wild turn. You lose the Incineroar for this, but I think that burn pays all the dividends that you need.
Yeah, that burn putting in a lot of work here, because not only is the attack dropped on the Entei now, that burn chip damage might have been the difference between Groudon surviving a Moonblast with a Flower Gift boost. And now that's really not an option anymore. This Groudon is in a much weaker spot than it was in that game too, where it was kind of the kingpin there. Eruption, a really cool tech there from Sanghyeon. He's shown 3 fire moves on the Entei so far, so I'm very curious as to what the 4th might be. But the Venusaur coming in here, there is no Flower Gift for the Entei just yet. We've seen the Earth Power do almost enough to knock it out, not fully, but since it is probably locked into that Eruption, I think that we've seen I imagine Choice Scarf is the item on that Entei. So if you Earth Power it, get it really low, Eruption will be doing very, very sad damage. So a really tough spot here for the Entei. And even though Flavio did lose a Pokemon on that first turn, I think he is still in a much more strong position just because of the threat this Venusaur poses, along with the burn on that Groudon.
Yeah, and like you said, if this is a Choice Scarf Entei, all you have to do is just continuously do enough damage to make sure that Eruption doesn't do as much in the subsequent turns, because Eruption, we see it on Torkoal, right? And Torkoal hasn't come to any of these games, but if it had, we definitely would have seen it before. Cherrim, though, will take the place, so this Eruption is not going to have to come out on this turn. You can definitely lock yourself into something next time you come in. Flower Gift, though, most importantly, is going to be able to deal with something like this Moonblast from the Groudon. It is not going to get knocked out on this turn. However, an Earth Power onto this Cherrim does actually very little damage, right? Not super effective, and it's also dealing with something like that Flower Gift, while another Precipice Blades from the Groudon onto both of these Pokemon. It's not enough to knock out the Xerneas, and it does well over half, I believe, to this Venusaur, but I don't think this Venusaur is carrying Sleep Powder, right? I haven't seen it yet, and this Groudon is not knocked out by that burn just yet either.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Sleep Powder is a move that Xerneas, or this Xerneas is not carrying Sleeper, I can tell you that. Not the move that Venusaur is carrying, but either way, this Groudon will go down to 1 more tick of burn damage, obviously to something like a Dazzling Gleam, any attack from the Venusaur. And the Cherrim, we have seen Grass Knot, which would knock out the Xerneas, but if Flavio gives the Cherrim a chance to Grass Knot this turn, something has gone horribly wrong, I think, because either the Venusaur or the Xerneas should be able to knock it out from here.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at this Venusaur now, just looking at its moves, I believe it's carrying Weather Ball, which could actually be really nice against that Cherrim if you do go for it. Cherrim instead protects here, though, so Cherrim is not going to want to get knocked out. You know how important it is to protect that Cherrim later in the game. Dazzling Gleam will be able to knock out this Groudon. I would be incredibly surprised if it lived, because this Groudon is not carrying something like Endure here, and it would have gotten knocked out by that burn anyway. So now you do lose that Groudon. Earth Power won't connect with a protected Cherrim, but, you know, this means that you're not going to be able to set the Sun up after this Groudon is off the field, unless for some reason Flavio brought Torkoal, which we know he didn't.
I think that's the win con here now. Letting Sun run out and letting Entei be the fastest Pokemon. Well, it's not faster than Xerneas, but Xerneas, like we've said, not able to do a whole lot of damage to Entei right off the bat. And if you're able to, let the Sun run out and no longer allow this Venusaur to have that Chlorophyll speed boost, Entei could be what we need to the game here.
Yeah, and Entei comes in, right? And Entei is still, a very fast, very powerful Pokemon. Like you said, you still have to stall out the Sun, right? This Entei is still at full HP. If it goes for another Eruption, you're going to get a double knockout here, no problem. And then you can even go for something like a substitute with this Cherrim and allow your Cherrim to maybe set up and be more comfortable in future turns. Even if you aren't able to get, even if you aren't even able to have that Flower Gift up for the remainder of the game afterwards, you still have a substitute, which still makes you more of a pain to deal with, especially trying to just get some strong moves moves off. You can go for Helping Hand behind your substitute, help your partner Pokemon get some really big hits off. You know, if you've still got the Pokemon in the back like that Rillaboom, and that Entei is, you know, pretty comfortable in front of a Rillaboom as well, especially since that Incineroar is off of the field. Dazzling Gleam from the Xerneas is enough to at least knock out that Cherim, most importantly. Does a little bit of damage onto this Entei, but now this Venusaur is able to go for an Earth Power with the Sun and the Chlorophyll boost is enough to knock the Entei out as well. So now Flavio is really great positioning instead of what we maybe thought it could have been a tougher spot here with that Entei, but Chlorophyll paying dividends, knowing that you have to take out that Cherim before you can take care of that Entei, and doing so with that Dazzling Gleam and with that Earth Power. Incineroar comes in for Sanghyeon, it's his last Pokemon. Even if Incineroar likes looking down both of these Pokemon separately, it's not going to be super comfortable in the end.
Right, a combination of Moonblast and Earth Power should be able to finish off this Incineroar. And I think crucially the Dazzling Gleam knocking out the Cherim before the Venusaur attacked meant that the Earth Power was not being weakened by Flower Gift, which was really the huge key there. You know, if the Flower Gift was still up, Entei maybe could have stomached that Earth Power and then fired off some like a Sacred Fire to knock out one of these Pokemon. But unfortunately that Cherim did expend its Protect on the previous turn, so if you wanted to go for Protect, it would have been a pretty low chance of hitting it. And I think Sanghyeon just trying to play the odds there, maybe trying to survive that Dazzling Gleam and hoping that that wasn't going to be enough.
Yeah, and a double protect from both of the Pokemon on Flavio's side, mostly just trying to stall out that fake out. And the Sun here, as now the Sun is now completely off of the field. So if this Incineroar goes for something like a Flare Blitz, not going to be as effective as it would be with the Sun. This Xerneas is still faster, and this Venusaur should still also be faster, even without the Sun and its Chlorophyll boost here. But, you know, this is a really nice, comfortable wrap-up for Flavio. He still has another Pokemon in the back as well to deal with this. He's going to be able to go for some really powerful Moonblast as well into this Incineroar. With that Geomancy, it does well over half, plus an Earth Power. Will very comfortably end this game for Flavio. A very offensive 3 games as well, especially for Sanghyeon, who has a team that can slow the field down a whole lot with that Trick Room especially. And if you bring that Trick Room and you have something like that Torkoal on your own side, you can slow this game down a lot, right? And you can maybe try and change it, but instead both of these players went full offense on their teams and went for the big hits early and often. So really great and very exciting from both of these players, but this means it's another win in the Italy column here, Jake.
Yeah, big start for Italy here, 2-0 up against South Korea, which means that they only have to win 2 of the remaining 5 in order to move on to the finals. So if you're Italy, you're very happy here. You got 2 big wins right off the bat, and you're in pretty prime position here for your final 5. That was such a good match. I think, like you said, it was very offensive all 3 games. It was a 3-game set, but it seemed like that could have been the length of like 1.5 games if they were, you know, slower teams, slower gameplay. So we got a lot of action right off the bat. Some really exciting. The end of that game too was really exciting. I think that huge Helping Hand press displays was just massive, and it was really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows exactly how good Groudon can be when Precipice Blades hits, right? Groudon's your best friend when Precipice Blades hits. No question.
And when it doesn't get burned by Flare Blitz.
Absolutely. When Groudon does exactly what you want Groudon to do, best Pokemon in the format. And then when it doesn't, you're like, this is the worst. I don't know why I use this restricted. I should be using Calyrex Shadow Rider that also gets a powerful double target move with full accuracy. You know, a couple of different, that's the metagame, right? Is you got to pick which restricted you feel is best for you and for your matchup and for your play style. So absolutely incredible showcase from both players.
Definitely, yeah. I think harkening to that point, you know, using the Xerneas, I think that just fits, like what you just said. You know, it fits with his playstyle. He's used it a bunch, and I wasn't really surprised to see it out of him. And I think the team that Sanghyeon had around that Groudon was basically meant to make that Groudon the centerpiece of that team. You know, using the Entei as something that could take out Groudon's checks, using the Cherim to take the Flower Gift and use it to boost Groudon's special defense. More importantly, attack, I would say. It's just really cool team building, I think, from both players.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to do it for this second game. Remember, guys, it is 2-0 Italy, so we will be coming back with our 3rd match. Once again, Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, sponsored by Elgato. Do not go anywhere. This will be a very quick break. We will see you guys soon with our 3rd match of the day.